Hi, I'm Dolly Vasta, and welcome back once again to Dolly's World. How many times have you read a newspaper article and you wondered, I wonder who wrote this? Did you agree with him or did you disagree with him? I know I have, and I decided to track down a writer who I have read many times in the Home News Tribune. He's my guest today. His name is Rick Malwitz, and he's featured writer for the paper. His column comes out on Thursday and Sunday. And welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
So whatever made you decide to become a writer? What inspired you? Did you always do it, or did this come raising children?
Well, I tell you, I'll give away my age and say that when I was going to school at Rutgers, Newark, back in 1968, which was a great news year, and I happened to get a part-time job as a copy boy at the old Newark Evening News, and I found myself in a newsroom for the first time and just sort of fell in love with the whole idea of we're putting a product out today, we're putting a paper out today, and let's get rolling on it. And the idea of the daily grind of a newspaper appeals to me. The idea of being able to create, tell stories, meet people, tell their stories, I just find it to be something very fascinating.
Wasn't there always the old saying, the smell of the presses?
Well, somebody once warned me, they said when that printer's ink gets in your blood, you're going to have a hard time getting rid of it. And so I guess there is something to that. Once you get inside a newsroom, once you get in that flow, it's hard to get rid of it.
How do you decide what article you want to write?
How do I decide what I come to a deadline and I say I got to get something out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Usually I try to write a column at least a day in advance so that the following day when it's due I can sort of massage it. I write about experiences I have when I write a column. I write about experiences other people have. I tell other people's stories, and so there's no one formula in which I follow. So every day is a different day. Every column is sort of a different format almost, and I guess the hardest thing is coming up with the ideas. Once I get the ideas, the writing itself isn't as hard, but just coming up with ideas is sometimes a challenge.
How much are you edited when you write a column? I mean, is it maybe 2 pages long, and your editor gets a hold of it and slices it?
Yeah, when I write columns, there's very little editing in the column because that's me, that's my voice, that's my opinion. Mm-hmm. I also write news stories, and they're edited probably a little more. Fortunately, we have spell checker on our computer system, so my spelling errors have been corrected in more modern ways. They'll correct grammar, some words, but usually not a whole lot. It's with a column, they like to keep what you think, and that's what they want in the column.
They keep it fresh.
Right.
You have carte blanche, in other words.
Yes.
Pretty much what I have here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is great, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm never told what column to write. I'm often told what stories to write, but never to write a specific column.
Let's talk about some of your the stories that you have written, though. And have you gotten a lot of emails on them, or pros and cons? I know I made a list of them, kind of, and we can talk about them. But one of them was the book for corrupt legislators, How to Survive Federal Prison.
Oh yeah, it was a gentleman down in South Jersey who was put in a federal prison for something, of course, he says he didn't do, or he says he was fairly innocent of. And as a man in his 50s, who grew up a middle-class life, all of a sudden he finds himself in a federal prison. So how do you deal with a federal prison? And I think we've all, not that we've contemplated actually doing crime, but you see enough stuff on television, you say, hey, how could I survive there? And he told how to survive, and what I found out was that even in the so-called country club prisons, it's certainly not it's something you don't want to do. And I talked with him, and he, what'd you learn from it? How'd you experience it? And just someone in like my station in life, all of a sudden in their 50s, you find yourself in prison. How do you deal with it?
How do you make a negative into a positive?
Yeah, in fact, I asked him, I said, there had to be something good out of this. And he said, he thought, and he said, well, I was able to counsel people He had, you know, because of his previous practice in politics and in business, he had certain sense that a lot of guys there did not have. So he tried to each day make something positive by helping other inmates there.
And then, of course, there was always Martha Stewart, and
Yes.
She did yoga
Yeah.
and other such things. But you kind of went on in your column, and you do in a lot of them, is to look for another kind of, was that really the right justice when he could have been doing community service?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a pretty old question about whether or not someone who has skills, should he be locked up, or maybe he'd be better off outside doing the type of work that he would, you know, under certain supervision, doing the work. There's a lot of work that very few people don't want to do. Well, rather than send someone to prison on my dime, why don't you have him outside doing the work? He's not a threat to society. He's put in prison as a punishment for what he did, and there's a role for punishment. But I think society would benefit more if inmates who are not threats to themselves, not threats to others, were outside doing something productive.
Somehow I can't see Martha Stewart emptying bedpans.
That's what she should have been doing, and then she would have been doing something a little more valuable. It would have taught her a much better lesson than being told at 6:30 in the morning you got to sit down there and eat your breakfast with everybody else and behave.
And then you talk about the teenager computer hacks, and I found that very interesting, that it was an Edison kid who really, you're excusing the expression, had really screwed up so many computers and businesses. Yeah,
he was a student at John P. Stevens High School in Edison, and he was sitting down at a computer, and he had much more ability with a computer than anybody else does. So how do you prove that you're better than the next guy with a computer? Well, you get into the system and you, what they say, hack the system. Mm-hmm. And so he was hacking the system on behalf of someone out in Michigan who was trying to create a competitive advantage over a rival company. And this kid from Edison sold out himself. He offered himself to this company out in Michigan. He did some mischief on the computer. He became a legend within the mischief-type people. I believe his only payment for what he did was a couple throwback jerseys and some sneakers. And now he's going to be doing prison time. And you talk about someone who is not ready for prison. This kid is going to be doing some adult time for what he did. And anybody who's been involved, who's involved on anything to do with a computer, anything to do with the internet, there's a lot of us out there saying to the judge, thank you for doing what you did. And I wrote that story, I wrote that column, and I would hope that that column would find its way to the people who would consider doing similar type mischief, sort of as a deterrent. Not to do it, because these are the consequences. You do it and you're going to do adult time.
Right, you're going to pay for it.
Exactly, yeah. And the amount of waste that is created by these so-called computer hacks is enormous. It's probably measured in the trillions of dollars worldwide, the damage that can be done through this, and the need for various types of security. So this kid who's in his little computer cubicle at home playing his little games is part of it's almost like an international crime syndicate, these kids that are hacking away at the computer.
That's interesting. It really is. Did you receive any mail on this?
I got several thank yous.
Did you?
I got the sense that the people were thanking were people sort of in my station who are frustrated by some of the roadblocks they find on the internet, some of the frustrations they have. So when they saw that this kid was getting punished for it, I got several thank you emails from people.
Any cons against it?
I got one con against it, that my, in effect, endorsing this kid going to jail was something that perhaps I wasn't as compassionate enough as I was. But that's why we have crime and punishment. You do the crime, there's certain punishment. And the value of that punishment, and the reason I wrote it, was to persuade the next guy not to do what this kid had done. And as word gets out, maybe these people out there that are doing the mischief will get religion as far as not doing what they do, because there's consequences.
Do you think in terms of black and white?
No. Sometimes I do. I mean, there is what C.S. Lewis calls true truth, and there's certain truths out there that I do believe in. But I think that a lot of issues out there, when people take strong opinions on one side or the other, there's got to be balance. And I try to, in a story especially, you want to balance a story. And even in a column, I'll oftentimes allow the fact that, hey, I'm not right all the time. This is what I think. Mm-hmm. But I don't get my ideas, I don't go up on Mount Sinai in the morning and get my ideas from God himself. You wrestle with some of these
Actually,
things.
they're written on that cement pad.
That tablet, right. In the original Hebrew, exactly.
Right. But in reading your articles, I do get the feeling that there are sometimes there's gray area, and by the time you get to the end of them, mm-hmm. you realize that you will talk about the crime, but you also talk about the punishment. Right,
exactly. In fact, it was a great quote attributed to Harry Truman, who was looking for one-armed economists. He says every time he talks to an economist, the economist will say, on the one hand, on the other hand. So he wanted one-handed economists so that they would give him
only one
version
opinion.
Of one strong opinion.
I wonder about administrations anyway, how often they want both sides of
right,
it.
Right.
All right, let's...
In fact, I value, I tell people when they either call me or email me with a comment about an opinion that I had, I said, you're telling me your version of events. Why don't you tell 150,000 readers and write a letter to the editor? Mm-hmm. Because I don't have any stranglehold on the truth, and when I write an opinion, it's my opinion. And if you have an opinion, write to the newspaper. And I say to the editor that puts together the letters to the editor page, when people criticize me, put their letters at the top, because I welcome people with different opinions.
Do you like people to argue with you?
I enjoy a good argument. Yes, I do.
A good give and take.
A good give and take.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
A little dialogue, and I do enjoy discussing issues.
You also talk it covers a couple of the articles. Welcome to America, where we can pray or not pray mm-hmm. as we choose. I enjoyed that. I really did. Especially the football praying. And I read this about 2 or 3 times, and I thought that it's right to be able to do it, in my mind. On the other hand, it's such hypocrisy.
What's the hypocrisy?
The hypocrisy is, let us play like warriors.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of warriors is to go out and spear the guy, knock him down, push his face in the dirt.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's curious that you read the New Testament, for example, and the Apostle Paul talks about athletic competition, about running the race to win the race. So there's nothing wrong with trying to win the race. One of the problems I have, though, with people praying prior to the football game is that they pray they want to win. And at the end of the game, the winning team gets up there at the end of the Super Bowl or whatever. They get up there and they want to give God the glory. And I'd be curious as to what the loser's thinking after he prayed and he didn't get his way. And does he give God? I've never seen a loser give God the glory for whatever he did in a particular game. So yeah, there is a little hypocrisy when they're praying. They want to win. But that's part of athletics. It's part of sports.
Well, I always thought that if you did pray before something, it was just to help you be your best.
That's what you're praying for, I would hope.
Without sounding like goody-goody two-shoes.
Exactly. Well, in fact, coaches are when they pray before the game, they always want to pray that everybody stays healthy. Although you want your team to stay healthier than the other team.
And the other there was an Irish quote, and being part Irish, I always laughed at it. That something about wishing them health unless they got ahead of you in the race, and then you hope they turn around.
Right. Get a little too overconfident, maybe, and turn around and creak the knee or something like that.
Yeah, just a little twitch. A twitch.
Yeah.
Nothing lengthy.
Right, right.
Did you get a lot of pros and cons to that in emails?
When I wrote about the issue involving the prayer with the East Brunswick
with the East
coach,
Brunswick group, that was another whole article.
Right.
Yeah.
I got a lot of. In fact, I guess the next day, I was telling somebody I got 9 emails and 7.5 of them were positive. One person was very negative, and one was sort of half and half, and the others were very positive toward that. The whole. So that in that respect, there seems to be people out there that might not agree with all of us religiously, but agree that religious expression in praying, for example, is not bad. And I admired the story I did in the follow-up column I did about the incident involving the 5 Muslims up at Giant Stadium.
Yes, that was an interesting story.
That they can teach a lot of us about the value of prayer. In fact, one of the Muslims, he's from Piscataway, said, part of his religion is to get down and pray 5 times a day. 5 times
a day, right.
And he said, you've just gotten done talking with God. 3 hours later, you're going to talk with God again. So in that time in the middle, you're not going to get involved in any mischief, because you're going to be talking to God pretty soon, and you don't want to come to Him with a guilty. And I think that's something that persons of every faith, every religion, ought to have the sense that there's someone we're answerable to. And so I think that, I might not agree with 99% of the Muslim religion, but when it comes to that whole issue of praying, I thought that was a very positive thing.
Well, it is, and it's humorous. How much trouble can you get into between prayer?
Yeah.
That you won't have to, and it's almost like Catholicism in a way, and I hope I don't get any mail on this, but is a confessional.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know the exact formula. In fact, the way he explained the prayer, it did not have the confessional.
I see. It was. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
But still, you're meeting someone who you believe is greater than you, and his feeling that it was going to keep him away from mischief was a pretty positive thing.
Well, I love the way you tagged that article about East Brunswick, and I hope I'm probably paraphrasing, but you said, but don't call the high school tomorrow because they're closed. It's a religious holiday.
Right. Yeah.
And I thought, touche.
It was. I guess the following day
was like the little.
Yeah, it was a Jewish holiday the next day, and what it does is acknowledges the fact that the East Brunswick public school system recognizes that there are people of faith out there, and a particular group of people of faith had a major religious holiday the next day, and they closed the school. I mean, even the ACLU shuts itself down on Christmas. So.
That reminds me of a place. We were looking for a place to have Thanksgiving dinner, the whole family, and I called a special restaurant down on the water in Perth Amboy, and they said, "Oh, we're closed Thanksgiving." And I thought, I really wanted to go to that particular restaurant.
Yeah.
And then I thought, hey, that's really great. All these people working there can be with their families.
Right, yeah. That's good. That's a good way of thinking about it, yeah.
Yeah,
Or if they don't have families, they're out looking for a
another
restaurant
place
that's open.
to eat.
New Jersey diners never close, so there's always the diner.
All right, are you a cynic then, or a realist, or a combination of them?
I am a combination. It depends on the issue, I guess. I realize that we have a real world out there with real people and real problems. I am a cynic when it comes to motivations of certain people, but I guess we're all sort of a blend. We're sort of a mixture of the various things.
Don't you think we get more like that as we get older? Because you've been writing columns for a long time. I've been doing this for a long time. So when you sit across from someone, you really get to look into their eyes and into their face and either know that they're conning you, but it's a good con, or they really are totally sincere.
Yeah. Well, people have their agenda.
Or they're a little of both.
Yeah. I always try my best whenever I'm doing stories or columns to meet people face to face. In fact, I'll tell them that. I said, I've conducted an interview over the phone. Somewhere it's impossible to talk with them face to face, but I want to sit down with you. I want to look you in the eye. I want to talk. And you get a better sense of people when you can sit down with them and watch their body language, look at them in the eye, and they become more human and you become more human rather than doing it over the phone.
That's true. And I just had a funny thought go through my head. They were probably both sitting here watching each other's face and body language to figure them out.
Yeah. I'm not schooled. When police officers, detectives, they're sort of taught what to look for in people. There's certain signs that people give off. I'm not that sophisticated. I haven't had any training, but I like to think that I am a good judge of people. And I also warn people that, is there anything you're hiding from me? Because if you are hiding something from me, and I write about you, that I'm going to get a call the next day, we're going to get emails the next day, hey, did you know such and such about this particular person? And so I say, don't embarrass myself by telling me untruths, because it's going to be uncovered the next day when people call. And don't embarrass yourself, because I'm going to do a follow-up story on you if in fact there is something that you've hidden and you've conned me. And none of us are perfect judges of people.
Oh, no.
Otherwise, there wouldn't be divorce court, I guess.
I have one more question that I wanted to ask you, and they're flashing times to me up there. What do you see for yourself as you go on writing? Would you like to write the great novel?
I would like, I've had some ideas kicking around. I would like to be able to go into a library in Topeka, Kansas, and see a book that I wrote. And I have certain ideas that I've been kicking around and discussing. I won't tell you what they are right now, but I read very little fiction. I like history, and so there are certain stories in history which fascinate me, and I love reading other people's account of history, and I would like to contribute something myself to the volume of history. And as I say, I'd like to be able to go to a Barnes & Noble someday and say, hey, I wrote that. That'd be neat.
Yes, it would.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know whether I would ever really want to get to that point where I would want to write a book. I've always written, but I usually write comedy material because that's how I think. I think in terms, I see everything in terms, and I know this is probably terrible, but funny.
Yeah, okay. I try to see humor and lightness and everything. I do. I did a story the other day about two girls at Douglas College over at Rutgers University who formed a group to bring reconciliation between Jews and Arabs. And they arranged for a team of comedians to come to Douglas College, one a Jew, one an Arab. And they have a comedy routine. And as I was talking to the girls, I said, one of the values of comedy is that we're all the same, and we all love good comedy. And comedy can bring people together the way, for example, music can, or other arts. I think there's a great value in comedy, being able to laugh at yourself, laugh at circumstances.
Well, I kind of think that humor really makes the world go round.
Yeah.
You can deal with anything.
I had a very interesting experience this past weekend. My wife and I went as tourists to New Orleans. And the particular section of New Orleans that was hit the hardest, the lower Ninth Ward. I went through there in a pickup truck driven by a Marine lieutenant colonel, and who'd been taking residents of that area through the area in a tour bus. And he was struck by the fact that so many of these people, not all of them, but many of them could come away laughing at what they had just seen, smiling, thinking good thoughts. He said there were a lot of people of faith there as well. In that calamity and the type of devastation is just, it's hard to comprehend.
It is.
But they saw humor in certain elements, and some of them were smiling and laughing, and the Marine thought that was a very positive thing. So if we can see, if they can see humor in that, and smile in those circumstances, that's the value of humor.
It certainly is.
Yeah, one of the values.
Well, Rick, I know our time is drawing to a close, and I just wanted to thank you so much. It was so much fun meeting you.
Oh.
Meeting the picture. Meeting the picture on the page. Mm-hmm. It really was.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the time.
And you're as charming and succinct as your articles are.
Well, thank you.
And I hope when you write your novel, you will come back.
Okay, will do.
You'll do your first interview on your book. Here.
That's a good idea.
How about it?
I got you on that. Okay.
Okay, now
Very
you'll
good.
have to finish.
Now I got to finish it, right.
Before I'm too old up here
Me
anymore,
too.
which may be very soon.
Yeah, okay.
All right. To all of you out there, I certainly hope you enjoyed today's show. I most certainly did. I had such a ball. So go on reading Rick's column. I'm sure he'd be happy to have you read it, and any mail, pro or con, that you might send him back. It's in Thursday and Sunday's paper. And I'll see you all next month. We're going to have a great show next month because it's our holiday show. So in the meantime, take care.